today's webinar. I'd like to start by thanking you for joining us today. I know you're going to get some great information from the session. Prior to joining Tom Sawyer, I spent 18 years developing and selling OSS tools at companies like Cisco, BMC Software, and IBM. So I know that visualization capabilities can make a huge impact both on usability of the tool and the success during the evaluation process. Having clear, intuitive, and attractive visuals can really make a product stand out. So hopefully today's session is going to help share some of our experience in making that happen. Quick look at the agenda for today. Start with a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions anytime during the webinar, then please type them into the questions box on the lower right of the GoToWebinar window. We'll attempt to answer them as we go along or at the end of the session, whichever is appropriate. If we do get any questions we don't have time to answer, we'll follow up after the session with the information. I'm afraid that due to the size of the audience, we'll be keeping attendees on mute for the whole session, so please do submit the questions via the chat window. After the event, we'll be sending a link to the recording of the session to all attendees, so please don't feel that you have to take notes as we go through. And finally, the purpose of today is not to provide you with a complete product demonstration or sales pitch of our product, but to impart what we hope will be useful information whether you use our tools or not. Of course, if you'd like to know more about how we can help you in your efforts, we'd love to hear from you, but that's not what we're pushing today. And having promised this isn't a sales pitch, I do want to show you two slides just to help establish why we think we're able to provide you with advice on this topic. Following those, we'll get straight into the meat of the presentation. The material is going to last about 30 to 35 minutes, after which we'll address any questions you may have, and we'll wrap up well before the hour. So why do we feel qualified to offer advice on the use of visualization in OSS developers? Tomsort Software has been working with such developers for almost 20 years. Our software is in many of the most well-known products on the market today, and we're continually working with new and existing customers as the state-of-the-art develops. While we work in a variety of industries, our area of expertise has always been graph layout, visualization, and analysis, and especially their application to a networking space. The company's been built to support a customer base that are embedding our software within the applications they build, focusing on the support and expertise required to excel in that area. With sales and services staff spread around the world, we work with our customers advising them on how to optimize the way they visualize data to suit their customers' specific requirements. Here's a sample of some of the customers that we work with. As you'll see, most of the leading OSS vendors are on the list. We also work direct with internal departments of many service providers, helping them build custom tools where the commercial product offerings don't address their needs completely. Working with these companies has provided us with a lot of insights into the challenges that we're solving for their users. A large number of those challenges today are created by the proliferation and complexity of IP devices being monitored. So today we intend to share some of what we've learned in that space. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Zane, Professional Services Manager here at Tomsort Software, who's going to take you through some of the key strategies of providing meaningful and actionable visualization in today's complex networks. Brett.
Thanks, Phil. So what I'd like to do today is to go over what we've found to be the best practices for visualizing network topologies, managing issues of scale, and giving network administrators access to the information they need when they need it. To illustrate what I'm talking about, I've put together a small application using Tom Sawyer perspectives. I'm going to go over this application and point out some of the things we've found to be important for our customers. Afterwards, I'll briefly show the modular architecture that we use to power the application and how that makes it easy to update your application as requirements change or the network data evolves. In this application, we start out with a high-level picture of the entire network. You can see a data center with a mesh topology at the center, and it's branching out to regional subnetworks in star formations. From our experience, network administrators need to use a graphical package with a good layout engine that can automatically place devices and route connections so that the network map is both readable and familiar. We hear that they need different layout styles to allow for different topology views that may be more suited to different network configurations. Network operators who want to see the clusters of devices in their network prefer to use a circular layout style. For those who want a more compact representation, then the orthogonal style is more appropriate. For a top-down view, they prefer to use a hierarchical style. And network operators who want to see a balanced, spread-out view prefer the symmetric layout style, which we started with. What we hear from network administrators is that the most important thing they need to see is a picture of the current status of the network. Which of the devices are having issues? Where is network traffic affecting performance? These kinds of things. So it's important to make status information very prominent, even when viewed from a very high level. Network operators need to see how traffic is affecting the network. To show this, we can color the connections between devices based on the connection load. You can see the color map on the left. We use a continuous color scale ranging from 0% green up through 100% load, red. Looking at the network map, you can quickly see that heavy traffic is affecting performance through part of the data center. Once a network operator has identified a problem, they need to get more details. By zooming in on the data center, we can start to see more information about the servers and routers involved. From this level, we start to see basic information about the devices. From our experience, it's best to reveal information through levels of detail. From a distance, two icons are shown prominently, one for the device type and one for the current status. As we get closer, we see more. The background color and the icons show the type of devices. In this example, we have servers in blue, switches in green, routers in cyan, firewalls in orange, and so on. When we zoom in, we can smoothly shift the level of detail so that more and more relevant information is revealed. Network operators may need to see things like the host name, the IP address, what operating system is used, CPU usage, disk usage, which ports are open, what applications are hosted on the machine, which services are available, etc. Here we see that this server has a major issue. Besides the current status, we've often found that there is a need to see historical information. Here below the status, a series of small colored bars that show the status history over the past 8 hours. Each bar represents the status for that hour, giving a better indication of when the problem may have occurred. The particular look of the devices has to be completely customizable. Application developers need to be able to show the information they want to show and present it with their own look and feel. This includes the particular icons used and the layout of the text and graphical components that make up the device representations. Network operators need to perform actions on the devices. The most intuitive way to do this is through actions provided directly on the device representation, either through the context menu or through buttons directly on the devices. Now that we're zoomed in, looking at the details of this server, we no longer have a view of the network as a whole, or this server's context in it. When someone is managing a network, they need to keep in mind how a particular device fits into the network as a whole. So it's important to provide ways of keeping their mental map of the network accurate. There are a number of ways that you can help users bridge the gap between the detailed view and the high-level view. Showing an overview of the network map can allow you to maintain your high-level view while still browsing the details. From our experience, a good way to reduce the size of the high-level view and make it more manageable is to filter. You may want to filter based on device type or some other attributes of device, such as their location. By filtering out the workstations, laptops, phones, printers, and web servers, we can see a somewhat simplified view of the network. Filtering out certain locations that we're not interested in right now can also help. These filter values should be driven by the data, not hard-coded into the application. That way the application doesn't have to be redeployed when the data changes. Now reapplying the layout helps compact the drawing, making it easier to navigate. Network operators often need to group parts of the network into aggregate groups in order to simplify what they're looking at. Depending on the network administrator's needs, grouping may need to be done based on the subnet, the physical location, virtual machine host, or a custom grouping specified by the administrator. Grouping by, say, the location and then collapsing those groups you present the user with a much simpler, much more approachable initial view. From our experience, it's important to propagate critical information, such as status, up to the group level. Here, the color of the groups is showing the most severe status of any device within the group. Network administrators still need to be able to drill down and see the details. Depending on the situation, we found that there are a couple of ways that may work best for this. You can expand an aggregation in place. And then you see the details for just that group. That way you keep the details hidden for the rest of the map, but you're able to see the details of the group you're interested in, and it's in the context of the network as a whole. Alternatively, you can drill down by creating a new view for just the contents of the group. In the context of the smaller detail view, a different layout style may be more appropriate. Network operators tell us that they need to group devices in different ways to be able to see the details of different types of groupings at the same time. For example, they may want to group by the virtual machine host. Now any virtual machines are grouped by the physical machine they are running on. You can then drill down into one of those groups while keeping previous drill down groups also available. In addition to using properties of the devices for grouping, we often hear that users need to create custom groupings of devices. To do this, you should provide a way for users to select any set of devices and set a custom named group manually. An inspector view, shown here in the bottom left, allows you to see and set attributes on several devices at once. So we can create a couple of groupings. And then you can collapse these groups and drill down into one of them if needed. In our experience, network administrators also need other types of views to be able to browse, sort, and look up specific devices. A tree view provides a way to browse through devices by location or by type. Now it's important to keep all of the views in sync so that selecting a device in the tree view brings focus in the network map. So you can see the same device in its context. A table view also provides a way to easily sort the devices by attributes of interest. For example, here the devices are sorted by status to see the most critical issues at the top. Selecting any of these devices, again, highlights the corresponding device in the network map. Network administrators need to answer questions about a network's robustness. For example, what is the minimum number of connections that could fail and prevent traffic between a pair of servers? To determine this, we can select a starting device and a finish device and then compute the minimum cut required to separate them. So at least all of these edges would have to fail in order to prevent traffic from going between those servers. Another question they may have is, what is the shortest path between a pair of servers? And is that how network traffic is actually being routed? Again, by selecting a starting device and a finish device, we can compute the shortest path. And that's shown here highlighted in blue. And this can also take into account different costs for the devices and the connections along the path if need be. Now, some of our customers have applications that allow editing the network. We have found that it's best to allow editing directly in the views themselves. To manually edit the topology of a network map, users should be able to place new devices directly into the map. For example, if a network administrator has just brought up a new firewall and a couple of servers, they can add them into the network and set the connections appropriately. After adding any new devices and connections, users need to clean up the drawing, but you don't want to completely rearrange everything and break their mental map. For this, it's best to use an incremental layout that preserves the positions as much as possible while cleaning up the drawing. Now, many of our customers have a need to keep the visualization logic and style separate from the application infrastructure code. This makes it possible to update the project without recompiling the application, so it can be customized on the fly. A schema or data integration for a particular customer can be customized without having to deliver a custom build. It also makes it possible for sales and services engineers in the field to update a project for a client without having to do a long engagement with engineering. By keeping the project definition of your application separate from the programming details, you make it easier to maintain. In Tom Sawyer Perspectives, we define all of the visualization components and filter components in a project using a graphical designer. What we're looking at now is the Perspectives Designer. It's showing the project that drives the application we were just looking at. The project includes the data schema, as well as the methods for doing data integration to pull data in and make it available to the views. Many times a company has data distributed in a number of places. For visualizing their networks, they may need to pull data from multiple databases or from different types of data sources, such as XML files. Here, the main network topology is coming from an Oracle database. What we're seeing are the bindings from the data schema to the tables and columns in the database. Now, the status information is coming from an XML file. Here, the status attributes in the data schema are being pulled from specific XPath locations in the XML file. To define a view of a particular schema, an application developer thinks in terms of the rules for building the visualization. A visualization package should have a simple way to construct a view that is intuitive for someone who is already familiar with their own data. In Perspectives, we construct a view by saying which actions should happen for every data element, such as for every device or every connection. The details of the actions are data-driven, so you define it once and then use it again against any data with the same format. Now, in recent years, we've seen more and more companies with a need to deploy management applications as thin clients through a web browser. One advantage of keeping the project definition separate from the implementation is that you can use the same project to deploy to either a desktop application or a web application. Previously, we were looking at a desktop application that uses the components defined in this project. We can preview the project now in the web so we can see how the same components would look in a web-based application. Companies deploying to the web want to have as much interactivity as possible, but many also want to minimize the use of plugins. For maximum flexibility on the web, it's best to have a completely thin client with no plugin, but have a good user experience by providing as much interactivity as possible. So that concludes our presentation, and we'll now open it up for any questions.
Thanks, Brett. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you do have questions, there's a text box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel. If you'd like to type them in there, then we can pass them on to Brett and get the questions answered. We do have a couple of questions in there already. So, Brett, the first question was, you've shown some interesting features, but how customizable is the functionality that you've got? Can I use other color schemes, icons? Can I set other filter criteria? Or am I limited to what you include in the product?
Sure. Yeah, the products we provide are meant to be customized to your own look and feel to a great extent. So every product we have, including Perspectives, has a detailed API that lets you get down into the details and change things if needed. You can also configure a lot of things just directly through the project designer, which we saw before. So you can set your look and feel, you can specify which icons you want to use, and all of this.
Great, thanks. And then the other question that we have is, you've shown some interesting functionality, but it's not a complete OSS application. How do I go about integrating this into a full product?
Well, all of the components that are defined here through the Perspectives Designer do have a high-level API, so they're really meant to be embedded into other applications. And just as I made this simple application here, you can take any of those components and just drop them into the appropriate panel in your app, and then you would just tie into the logic of your application. You can create customized actions that go in the toolbar button that would call into your application, and this kind of thing. So it's really meant to have a very tight integration with any custom built application that you might have.
Great, thanks. It looks like we don't have any more questions coming in, so I'm going to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope you found the session useful. We will be sending you a link to the recording early next week, so please feel free to share it with any of your colleagues who may be interested but couldn't attend today. And we'd very much appreciate it if you could take 2 minutes at the end of the webinar and just complete the 2-question survey that should pop up as you close out of the webinar. And obviously, if you're interested in talking further to us about anything that you've seen today or any other visualization, layout, or analysis matters that we can help you with, please don't hesitate to contact us. All of our contact details can be found at tomsawyer.com and will come in the email that comes out with the link to the presentation. So with that, I'd like to thank you all, and that's the end of today's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.